Welcome to week 11. I just want to make a short video for you for this week. The text talked about a couple of techniques that were featured a lot in heavy metal, and I thought it would be interesting for you and me to think about those for a few minutes. The first one I want to talk about is tapping. Now, tapping is a technique that a lot of guitarists began to use in the 1980s. And, well, this is what it is. So, first of all, we can get a notes a few different ways on the guitar. I can strike it with my right hand. As you can see, I've got some distortion on this guitar today. I can also hit a note with the left hand. So if I can play the right hand, and I just tapped it with the left hand. Or I can go the other way. I can play it, and I can pull it off, so I get a note with a lower note. This is called actually a pull-off, or a descending slur. This is called an ascending slur or a hammer-on. In rock, we usually call them hammer-ons. Then we put them together. And you get a little trill. You can even hit it. You don't really need to have a right hand. But here's the thing that people started to do. Of course, now you could get a note with this hand, and you can put them together, right? So you could be like a... So Eddie Van Halen became well known and influential. Well, he was a great guitarist, and as you probably know, he recently passed away. He was 65 years old. But when he came on to the scene in the 1980s, it was a big deal because it was so different, even though he was using some things that had been done for a long time. Now, Eddie Van Halen, of course, was classically trained. He was a classically trained pianist, so he was a trained musician, but self-taught on the guitar. The tapping technique became one of the things that he did. He did many other things, obviously. But it was such a big deal, because not that many guitarists that we knew of had used it. But it actually goes back a long ways. As I mentioned to you, it was found in the classical guitar repertoire. Now, the first example I've heard of it was in a work by Miguel Llobet, Spanish guitarist, and this is Variations on a Theme by Soar, and it's heard in the ninth variation. And I actually have a video of that, Thomas Vilato performing that, and Thomas Vilato has played at Grand Rapids Community College several times. Really a wonderful guitarist and great person. And here's Thomas playing Variation 9 with the tapping technique. Now, it's also heard in jazz guitar. Some people say Tal Farlow, a jazz guitarist, used it in the 60s, 50s. And then also Harvey Mandel, who was the guitarist for Canned Heat. I don't know if you know this, but Canned Heat played at Woodstock. They were on, if you've ever heard the Woodstock album or seen the movie of Woodstock, you would see Canned Heat. And Harvey Mandel was the guitarist. He used the tapping technique in the 60s. But then, of course, it continued. It got more popular, and there were a number of guitarists that used it. And I wanted to just share some of those with you today. So the next one we're going to listen to is Preston Reed. And Preston Reed is performing a piece here that he wrote, his own composition called Tractor Pull. Preston has played on the guitar series at Grand Rapids Community College a number of times, too. And he's a really excellent guitarist. And that's one of the techniques that he uses quite a bit. So here he is, Preston Reed playing Tractor Pull. And then the last guitarist I'd like to show you, and this is another well-known acoustic guitarist. You may have heard of him, Michael Hedges. And I actually met Michael Hedges while I was a student at Florida State University in 1985. I had a guitar duo, a classical guitar duo, and we were at the local radio station performing on air. And when we finished, I looked up, and then the control booth, so I had the glass window, and behind the glass window, there was a wild man jumping up and down, waving, saying, "Hey, hi everybody." And a friend of mine that I was playing with said, "Do you know who that is?" And I said, "No." He said, "That's Michael Hedges." I'm like, "Oh, okay, well, let's go meet Michael Hedges." And we talked to him. He was a great guy. Unfortunately, he did have a car accident a few years later and passed away, but he was another very well-known guitarist and a specialist at tapping, and one of the originators of it as well. So I'm going to play a little bit of this. This is Aerial Boundaries by Michael Hedges. The next technique I wanted to talk with you about today is called palm muting, and this was another technique that became used a lot in heavy metal in the 80s. And actually, it had been used before. It's actually used in classical guitar, actually for, of course, way before that. And guitarists, I remember even Jeff Beck in the 60s and 70s, you mute with the palm. But you hear it a lot in heavy metal, so let me just show you what that sounds like. So if I play a chord without muting, as you're going to hear, and I'm using what we call power chords, which means I'm playing a bar chord, but rather than play the whole chord, I'm just going to play that much, because you hear that a lot, and there's no upper notes of the chord, you just hear that. And so if you just went in eighth notes, for example, you get that. But if you mute it with the palm, you just kind of put your palm right next to the bridge here. If you get it too far over, it won't sound. So you got to be a little bit, have a little string sound, but just stop it a little bit. And you can do more than that. Let's say if you had like a chord arpeggio. You can play it without muting. Now I'm going to mute it. You hear something like that. So that's the technique. Palm muting, and you'll be hearing that in the music you listen to this week. Last week, I talked about the decline in live music due to disco, and some people say a recession. Well, maybe that had an effect. I'm not really sure about that myself, but disco definitely did. And when I said that, what I was talking about was local live music. Now, actually in Grand Rapids, there's an increase in, top live music. I mean, we never had the Rolling Stones before that I know of, recently, and Paul McCartney came. The Beatles never came to Grand Rapids before. So we've had some really big time shows in Grand Rapids, but it's just what I was really talking about was the local music scene. And And I was thinking about this and how that trend continued. And one of the reasons was, well, we've been talking about synthesizers and drum machines. Well, guess what? In the 1980s, you get one guy with a synthesizer and drum machines, or two or three maybe, and it sounds like a whole band. So you don't actually need as many people. So that was another way that musicians kind of got cut out of live music at that time. Hey, I'm just saying, I was there, I remember it. So I'm just reporting what happened. The other thing is, of course, in studios, people started to use those tools, and that replaced them needing as many musicians to do it. I did like what some of you were pointing out in your post, that you did like seeing live music. And I guess, it is interesting because, we hear it on recordings or we see it on the internet, it's like, and I can go to the grocery store and buy apples and lettuce, and well, where does that come from? It comes from the grocery store, right? Well, somebody had to grow it. And so that's the beauty, I think, of seeing live music. You actually see, well, what did it really take to do that? So I do appreciate some of you mentioning things like that. So this week includes some information about this video in an email to me. And the other thing that's a little bit different this week is I want you to make one post on the heavy metal lesson and then one post on the 2 hip-hop lessons. The third post will be on your presentation. So what I'd like you to do is make a post about your specific topic and how you plan to present it. So are you going to do a Zoom meeting, or do you plan to make a video? And let's talk about how that's going to happen. But I just thought it would be nice if everybody could mention what they were doing, what their topic was about, so that other students could see what we were going to be doing that last part of the semester. And the other thing is, if you have a topic, somebody that we've already talked about, Elvis, some people are doing, I think somebody's doing Elvis, the Beatles, Jimi Hendrix. So we have talked about them some. I want you to bring something new to that. It's important not to just say the same thing that we heard in the text. So bring some new things, give us some new insights too. The bibliography is due by next Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So there is information in the week 11 folder. And so that's it. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great week. I'll see you soon.